He's raked and ridden more than most men, yet this Victorian anti-hero is a scoundrel, coward, liar and bully. Today we're going to look at the life, campaigns and most importantly the medals of arch-cad and bounder himself, Sir Harry Flashman. Born in 1822, Harry Flashman is expelled from rugby school, aged 17, for drunkenness. Angering his father when he confessed to this beastly behaviour, Flashman then decides on a career in the army. Using his family connections and a cousin at Horse Guards, oh no, not a cousin, that's this chap. Instead, Flashman has an uncle at Horse Guards, Uncle Bindley. Bindley is able to pull a few strings and allow Flashman, with his father's reluctant financial support, to purchase a commission in the 11th Dragoons, who later become the 11th Hussars. This begins a swashbuckling and adventurous military career, built on luck, charm, and the constant effort to avoid danger. Joining the highly fashionable and exclusive 11th Hussars, known as the Plungers or Cherry Pickers, as a dashing cavalryman, Flashman soon became an expert swordsman, loving nothing more than a good gallop. After being dismissed from his fashionable high society regiment for marrying his beautiful but questionably loyal wife Elspeth, who was the daughter of a nouveau riche industrialist, aka tradesman, and therefore quite unacceptable to Flashman's snobbish commanding officer Lord Cardigan, he was shipped off to India to be attached to a native Lancer regiment. Whilst idling in Calcutta awaiting a proper posting, Flashman unexpectedly impressed the Governor-General, the Earl of Auckland, with his knowledge of the local lingo and general toadying. Auckland promptly appointed him as an aide to General Elphinstone in Afghanistan. Flashman was then sent up the Grand Trunk Road to join the British Army of Occupation in Afghanistan. Surviving the retreat from Kabul and witnessing the last stand of the 44th at Gandamak, Flashman emerged as an unwitting hero, the sole surviving European at the heroic defence of Piper's Fort, which was besieged by hordes of Afghan tribesmen. Piper's Fort was a fictional outlying post cut off from the main British garrison nearby at Jalalabad. Flashman was discovered by the relieving troops, clutching the regimental colours amid heaps of enemy dead. Conveniently, there were no surviving witnesses to report his abject cowardness. For his supposed gallantry, the hero of Piper's Fort was duly entitled to his first campaign award, the Jalalabad Medal. Two types of this medal were issued. The first is generally known as the Mural Crown, and the second the Flying Victory type. The first was struck in Calcutta, but it was considered inappropriate, and the second was later struck with a new design in London. Over 2,600 of the Mural Crown version were issued. Although those in receipt of the original medal could exchange for a new version, few did so. For example, I believe only approximately 50 men of the 13th Foot opted to exchange. I may go into the story behind this medal in more detail in a future video, so we'll leave it for now. Of India, Flashman declared, "There may be better countries for a soldier to serve, but I've not heard of them." Speaking of the native inhabitants of India, Flashman stated, "I liked them better than the Scots. Anyhow, their language was easier to understand." According to Flashman, his three main strengths were the ability to quickly master languages, horsemanship, and fornication. Returning to dear old Blighty, our now fated Hector of Afghanistan was taken by the Duke of Wellington, referred to by Flashman as his nose ship, to Buckingham Palace to receive a special medal for his Afghan heroics, known as the Queen's Medal. Flashman was informed by the Duke of Wellington that he would get a medal no one else will ever have, with only a few struck. Pinned to his manly chest by a grateful Queen Victoria, who expressed her thanks and admiration of his brave and loyal service, the only clue we have to this award is that its ribbon was pink and green. Flashman was the only man to be awarded this, and he stated he would only wear it on ceremonial days, along with his other assorted tinware, which served, in his words, to disguise a cowardly scoundrel as a heroic veteran. As we see in Flashman's Lady, he is a keen cricketer, and also hangs out in Oxford Street and Regent Street pubs, such as the Green Man and Still, which is sadly no longer with us. That said, conveniently, there is still a pub with loosely the same name, the Green Man, nearby in Berwick Street, which is still operating today. A couple of years later, Flashman is yet again sent back to India on an intelligence gathering mission. This time, the British anticipate conflict with the Sikh army, known as the Khalsa. After plenty of adventures romping about, Flashman becomes unwillingly involved in the battles of First Shah and Sobran. For his efforts, he would receive the Sutlej Campaign Medal with 2 battle clasps. After a few more adventures in the deep south of America and Europe, now back in London, living the dream, spending his wife's inheritance, and in his words, randying about and general loose living, his bubble would soon be burst. In early 1854, Flashman again finds himself called back to active duty after 6 years on half pay. With the Crimean War looming, our antihero, with a liver as yellow as yesterday's custard, attempts to wrangle his way out of combat, using his uncle's influence at Horse Guards again to post him to a cushy job on the Board of Ordnance, far from the action and based in London. Possibly a Victorian equivalent of the Women's Auxiliary Balloon Corps. Initially, his scheming worked, and he was assigned to musketry testing at Woolwich Arsenal. Staying safely out of the action, Flashman would get up to his usual hijinks, drinking and carousing in West London. During his time in Ordnance, he would work on boring but crucial administration for the army leadership. When Flashman wasn't squiring his wife Elspeth, he was busy, in his words, getting back into his favourite swing of devil bones, mulled port and low company, riding around Albert Gate by day and St John's Wood by night, racing, playing pool and carousing with the lads. He would also spend time boozing in the cellars and pubs around Charing Cross. However, Flashy's plans would fail miserably when he is made guardian of one of Queen Victoria's cousins and is sent to the Crimean War, attached to the 17th Lancers. Whilst there, in between various feats of daring do, he is involved in the battles of Alma, the early part of the Siege of Sevastopol, and Balaclava, earning 3 clasps to his next award, the Crimean War Medal. An unwilling participant in the charge of the Light Brigade, suffering from feverish dodgy bowels, sweating like a bootneck in a spelling test, and with terrible nervous flatulence, Flashman reaches the Russian guns in front of other surviving members of the charge, hides under a gun limber, and promptly surrenders. After a strenuous period as a POW, being employed as a chief stud to a Russian nobleman's daughter, our hero escapes his captors, and after a series of adventures in Central Asia, Flashman emerges lousy and breathless at the Khyber Pass, safely back in British India. Contracting cholera in India, he returns to England by late 1855, content to settle down as a staff colonel on half pay and resume his carousing in London. On the eve of the Indian Mutiny, Flashman is once again dispatched to British India after an audience with Lord Palmerston inspecting some dodgy chapatis in Balmoral. His task is to uncover Russian agent provocateurs or spies fomenting unrest in India, gauge the mood of the sepoys, and persuade the Rani of Jhansi to remain loyal to the crown. Sent undercover to Jhansi in central India, he is soon caught up in the chaos of the rebellion, surviving massacres, betrayals, and passionate entanglements through his usual blend of cowardice, luck and charm. Ultimately, Flashman finds himself embroiled in both the First Relief and the Siege of Lucknow. Towards the end of the campaign, Flashman finds himself imprisoned in a Gwalior dungeon for 2 months, with nothing for company but rats, fleas and cockroaches. Whilst lesser men might have turned to prayer or mental arithmetic to preserve their sanity, Flashman passed the time by compiling a mental roll call of his amorous conquests. From a sweaty kitchen maid in Leicestershire when Flashman was at the tender age of 15 to his most recent escapade. By his own reckoning, the total count came to a remarkable 478, not counting repeat performances. Flashman confessed, "I've had enough assorted trollop to fill Chelsea barracks." Although normally a heartless scoundrel with the ladies, Flashman, aside from his wife, would hold a candle for and have lifelong affection for Lola Montez and the Rani of Jhansi. For his involvement in this campaign, he received the Indian Mutiny Medal. Having taken part in the defence and subsequent relief of Lucknow, and later serving with the intelligence section during the Central India campaign, Flashman was entitled to 3 clasps: Defence of Lucknow, Lucknow and Central India. On the side during the campaign, Flashman used his Rajput orderlies and a little creative accounting to turn a tidy profit. Using intelligence department funds meant to pay off informers, etc., Flashman used the funds instead to buy up looted gold and jewellery at bargain prices. As he later remarked, "I paid it all back out of the profits, no irregularities, and finished with a handsome surplus, which built Gandamak Lodge in Leicestershire for my declining years." A typical Queen's officer snob, Flashman would describe officers of the East India Company, including the future Field Marshal Lord Roberts, as addiscum tripe. For his service, furthermore, Flashman received Britain's highest award for gallantry, for amongst other heroics, his most gallant conduct in the defence and evacuation of Cawnpore. He would be presented with a Victoria Cross. Flashman was typically unimpressed with Britain's highest gallantry decoration, later describing it as a shabby little bronze cross. After a short detour in the United States becoming involved in John Brown's raid on Harper's Ferry, we then find Flashman in China during the Second Opium War as an intelligence chief, doing a bit of smuggling on the side, navigating imperial politics and chaotic battlefields. Our swashbuckling, valiant veteran of Lucknow and Balaclava survives ambushes, nearly being exposed as a coward, and encounters with allies, enemies, and swooning ladies. Along the way, he becomes entangled in intrigue and romantic escapades, and emerges with his reputation enhanced, despite his efforts to avoid heroism. He also receives the Second China War Medal with Taku Forts and Peking clasps. After this war, travelling back to Europe via the Pacific and America, through a mix of bad luck, opportunity, and his usual knack for being where the trouble is, Flashman becomes embroiled in the early stages of the United States Civil War, whilst travelling in the southern states. He would serve with both sides, allegedly involved at the battles of Chancellorsville, Gettysburg, and Yellow Tavern. Flashman would be awarded a US Medal of Honor for his service during the Civil War. Flashman later resides in the fashionable Berkeley Square in well-heeled Mayfair in the West End of London. He affords this with a combination of his wife's inheritance, the spoils of war, and other illicit incomes earned over the years. Sadly for us, there seems to be a large antiques fair going on right now, with a marquee blocking out the view of the square, but I hope this gives a rough impression. Speaking of his experiences during the US Civil War, Flashman states, "I never cared much for service with foreign armies. At best, it's unfamiliar and uncomfortable, and the rations are liable to play havoc with your innards. The American Confederates weren't bad, I suppose, bar their habit of spitting on carpets. And the worst I can say of the Yankees was that they took soldiering seriously and were under the impression that they invented it." He would then go on to Mexico, working with Emperor Maximilian I. Once that's out the way, Flashman then turns up on the Abyssinia campaign, escorting a shipment of silver bullion to General Robert Napier's forces in Abyssinia. Napier then dispatches him on an undercover mission. Flashman described Abyssinia as a traveller's nightmare, rugged and desolate, beyond description, racked by perpetual civil wars in which the tribal leaders fought for supreme leadership, as well as a land populated by warriors who decorate their lances with the courting tackle of their enemies. He would receive the Abyssinia Medal, one of the most expensive medals ever made. See my Lord Chelmsford video for more detail on that one. Although he may be the black sheep of Victorian heroism, Flashman takes enormous pride in his appearance. His uniform is always pressed when possible, whiskers trimmed, and boots polished to perfection. In the rare moments he takes breaks from his exotic adventures, Flashman would spend time at various London clubs. He was a member of such clubs as the Army and Navy Club and would frequent the Reform Club. At these clubs, he would mainly be involved in playing billiards, hobnobbing with aristocrats, gambling on races, or cheating at cards. One fascinating and exotic campaign medal that Flashman never got his hands on, however, was the India General Service Medal, 1854. Like Flashman, you can swagger around London pubs and clubs, displaying your knowledge of campaigning in India. But rather than sporting a pair of cherry pickers and a cheroot, you can show off your copy of Clasps of Courage. Learn about exotic Victorian campaigns in Persia, Burma and the northwest frontier that Flashy managed to avoid, and help support the channel. An Amazon link is in the main channel description. After a period in the mid-1870s, getting caught up with General Custer at the Battle of the Little Bighorn, Flashman may have qualified for a later Indian Campaign Medal, though I'm not sure of this as he was a British citizen at the Battle of Little Bighorn, and he seemed to have a blurred line as a civilian observer and a scout, to my understanding anyway. Having had experience of the Wild West, both in the 1840s and the 1870s, Flashman made these observations of Apache warriors. They knew how to fight after their fashion, far better than the Plains tribes. Bar the Pathans, they are the best guerrillas I ever saw. In late 1878, he's up to some shady business in South Africa, and then, as a civilian, is caught up at the Battle of Isandlwana, making a dramatic escape by wagon, and later reaches Rorkes Drift. One thing we can be thankful for was that Flashman solved the long-standing historical argument of why the 24th line broke suddenly at Isandlwana. Flashman confirmed it was a lack of ammunition reaching the forward companies. Although a civilian, being an old war horse, he may have qualified for a South African medal with 1879 clasp, unlike the veteran soldiers of the 24th Foot who we saw fighting, who would have qualified generally for the earlier clasps, say 1877, 78, 79. Later, in the early 1880s, he spends time with Sir Garnet Wolseley at the invasion of Egypt, fighting at the Charge of Kassassin and the following Battle of Tel el-Kebir. They also have had some involvement in the Gordon Relief Expedition, though I'm not sure of that, so if anyone knows, please let me know in the comments. Finally, we see him mysteriously involved in the defence of the legations during the Boxer Rebellion, where he would earn his last campaign medal, aged in his late 70s. His foreign awards also include the French Legion of Honour, assuming from the Second Empire period perhaps, Austrian Order of Maria Theresa Grand Cross, and the Danish Order of the Elephant, which I think was taken away from him. From the Queen, Flashman also received a Knights Commander of the Most Honourable Order of the Bath, and Knights Commander, the Most Eminent Order of the Indian Empire. His investiture for his Indian Empire Award would have been after 1886, when Knights Commander rank was instituted. On Britannia's and Queen Victoria's enemies, Flashman reckoned there were 4 main armies which could give Tommy Atkins a run for his money during this period. They were the Zulus, the Gurkhas, the Sikhs, and the Dervishes. Therefore, for our hapless hero, we have Victoria Cross, Knight Commander of the Order of the Bath, Knight Commander of the Order of the Indian Empire, Jalalabad Medal, Sutlej Medal, Crimea Medal, Indian Mutiny Medal, Second China War Medal, Abyssinia War Medal, South Africa Medal, Egypt Medal, China War Medal 1900, and foreign medals, French Legion of Honour, Austrian Order of Maria Theresa, Knight Grand Cross, Danish Order of the Elephant, US Medal of Honour, the Civil War version, I think it's a different ribbon on that one, and finally, Indian Campaign Medal. With a hazy memory in his old age, Flashman did mention as well that he was at Chillianwallah, charging the wrong way, but I've dismissed that as he would have been in America at the time, so discounted the Punjab Medal for the Second Anglo-Sikh War. I've gone into much more detail on the majority of these British campaign medals and also the US Indian Campaign Medal in earlier videos in my back catalogue, so please check them out if you're interested. Flashman was furthermore described in the book as a vigorous yet selfish lover. Although a man of many faults and vices, Flashman was perceptive and saw the hypocrisy and double standards of the world he lived in, and at times the government and statesmen he served. He would live to a ripe old age, passing away in 1915. I've gleaned much information about his awards from the inside cover of my trusty Flashman novels, where many of his awards are mentioned. On researching, I've done my best, but I do know the shady character that he is, he possibly may have other awards that I'm unaware of. If you like this content, please check out my other videos. I've got two here. One is a light-hearted one on the shady spy Major Ducot, another fictional character from the Sharp series. And another, if you have a spare half an hour and are into more serious military history, is the Battle of Maiwand. Should pop up, I think, here. Thanks for watching. I hope you found some value from this, and I'll see you in the next one.